Hey, Jenny, we're recording now.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, here we are. So I think if I remember correctly, what we're doing, we're talking about the full moon. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, we're talking about the full moon in Sagittarius on June 5th.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. You just oriented me. Okay, full moon in Sagittarius on June 5th. Now I'm going to open up the chart of that moment. And this is, from where I live. So depending on where you live might be a little bit different, but here we are, basically, here we are. There's the chart. So what you want to look at first of all is you can see very clearly the sun and the moon are in opposition, and that's what a full moon is. So
yes.
when I see a full moon, when I think about a full moon, the first thing that comes to my mind is just the whole idea of full illumination. It's like something is clear. We see the full big picture somehow.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts about a full moon?
Well, what you just said, something coming to full illumination of that cycle. So 2 weeks ago, we had the new moon. And so now we're seeing something become visible in those short 2 weeks. And also, the second part of that is then you've got to look back at when was the moon new in Sagittarius. And that brings you up to speed with the 6-month cycle. And
so we're looking at, so when we see a full moon, we're looking at 2 different cycles, right? We're looking at the 1 month cycle, which, so we'd be looking back 2 weeks. And then we also look at the larger cycle, which puts us back 6 months, right?
Yep. Okay. Correct.
All right.
The other thing too I want to mention about this particular full moon is that it is our first lunar eclipse in the Sagittarius and Gemini polarity. Yes. So we've had one other lunar eclipse this year. It was the one in January. I think it was January 10th, and that was Capricorn Cancer. And now we're moving into this where we're going to see exactly the nodes of the moon are going to be the thing that you'll see reflect that. So this is our first eclipse. It's a penumbral eclipse. So that means that it's not a really necessarily potent eclipse. It's just barely in the shadow of Earth. So, but it's the first one.
So, one thing I want to say about that, because you mentioned the last time it was Cancer to Capricorn, is that the nodes, you watch them, they go backwards.
Yeah.
Right. So the nodes have you see right there, the north node is at 2956 of Gemini. So it's just dipped in there and is kind of changing the story of the nodes in current time. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then it's interesting to me, so from our Eastern Standard Time here, isn't it interesting that this moon, it's the Sagittarius Gemini, and it's in the 3rd and the 9th house. Yeah. So a lot of suggestion around information, wisdom versus information, and showing that. And then the other thing you just cannot avoid with this one is look at that moon. It opposed Venus first. And Venus is in retrograde right now. So we're in that unusual time of Venus. So what is that saying? What is the information that's being brought to light here? Venus retrograde.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about, isn't it?
So it's like the moon opposed Venus first. It picked up all of this significations of the retrograde Venus, which is questions around, what's the value of what I say, right?
Right.
Yeah, and reevaluating that.
Yeah, reevaluating what's wisdom and what's just talk.
Yeah.
How do you know?
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about that with the Venus retrograde, just the all the conspiracy theories and all the conversation about closing down the post office and, you know, these things that are so Gemini oriented. And just the importance, and also the importance with this full moon that we're just past that inferior conjunction of the sun and Venus.
Yeah.
Which really puts us, you know, we change from Venus being an evening star to it now, it will come into being the morning star. So there's this whole idea of some of the work on our values is just getting ready to come back into the light.
Yeah.
And this full moon is showing that.
Yeah. Well, you got me thinking, Lori, when you're saying, you know, how the Venus is going to make that switch to being a morning star. But for a while, it's going to be invisible when it makes that transition. And it's interesting because it will be invisible. I believe it's about 40 days, which there's, I don't know, there's like a biblical reference to 40 days of having to go through the desert. So it's a little bit of this idea of having to go in and go on this, a little bit of a personal quest, perhaps, to understand, you know, what you need to do next, or how, and bring that kind of quest into your normal life is what that Venus is symbolizing.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And with the this full moon, the sun being in the same sign as that Venus is retrograde. Yeah, it's just, it points again to, you know, go back. If you're listening to this video, go back and look at where Gemini is in your chart and where Sagittarius is, and what is the kind of the pull, what is it that you're learning between what you really understand and what you're gathering information about. I don't know, there's something really potent in this full moon for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just thinking about exactly those things. Like, I'm just trying to think, I think in my house, my chart, it's the moon is in the 6th house and it's the 12th house. So it's questions around surrendering and trusting and having compassion for others, but then also doing a due diligence of the work. But anyway, I see that you're highlighting the Mars.
that's really interesting. The 6th to the 12th. Yeah, for me it's the 4th to the 10th. So it's that whole question of home and career and what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah, and having to work at home, you know, working at home, which you do most of the time anyway, but even more so, like having that be what you must do.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But yeah, that. I'm glad you highlighted the Mars. So for those of you who are looking at this, you'll notice that right after the full moon, like immediately after, the moon will then square Mars.
Yeah.
So I think of that as the moon is the weaver. So it contacts Venus. It weaves that question around values into the full moon that brings it to public consciousness. And then as soon as that happens, it demands action by contacting Mars. So you got to taking action on it.
Right.
So.
Right. And Mars being in Pisces and loosely conjunct Neptune, the action that you need to take is very internal. Would you say? I think
watery.
Very, very, there's a sensitivity in it. You don't really know what's happening also.
Yeah, and I just always think, I can't help it with Pisces, but I just think it's that highest ideal in the most positive sense. It's considering all of the other beings on this planet in taking that action. It's understanding we're all in this together at this very sort of at a spiritual level, but also just a very practical level. I mean, Pisces is not practical, but it's forcing you to consider those higher ideals of us all being included. And boy, what are we seeing in the news right now?
Wow.
Right?
It's pretty intense and very Martian. But the fact that it's in Pisces and conjunct Neptune just makes me wonder, more about what's going on undercover.
Mm.
What actions are being taken that we aren't really aware of?
Yeah.
You know,
That's a
what's
good question.
underground.
Yeah.
Jennie, I think there's some sound that's coming through. I don't know if it's something you're touching. It sounds like there's something on your end that's making a.
Is it still doing that? I can't. There's
Yeah.
nothing.
I wonder what it is. Okay. Anyway, I hope it's not bothering anybody too much. I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I can't hear it or I'm doing it. So.
Okay. I wonder what it is. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention here is just to look back at the date on the new moon that led to this.
Right. It was May 22nd.
Okay, May 22nd. So if you're working with your own chart and doing your new moon rituals on May 22nd or 23rd, you probably did that new moon ritual. What was, okay, so the new moon would have been, I don't know what degree, but it was before the Venus conjunction. But anyway, look back. What seed did you plant in Gemini? In the idea would have been for your new moon ritual that you were planting a seed for increasing, I don't know, understanding, intellectual understanding, some project you wanted to get started on, some writing or communication project that you wanted to get started on, possibly. So at this full moon, you're going to think back, what have you accomplished over these past 2 weeks on that, and really, looking at that, identifying how it plays into your values, your wisdom, your understanding, and your communication. And then for the larger cycle, thinking back to the larger cycle, you've got the date on that, right, Jennie?
Yeah. What was it? November 26th, I think. Yeah.
That would have been the new moon in Sagittarius.
Yeah.
So that if you've got an idea of what you began back in late November, you said late November?
Yeah, November 26th.
So if you think about what began in late November, November 26, 27, somewhere around there, how has that in the larger cycle, how are you seeing where you've come with that cycle? It would be interesting to know what was going on in the world at that time that now we're seeing what we're seeing. It's, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have any memory for myself of what the heck was happening in November.
I know.
I need to.
Too. It was Thanksgiving around that time in this country, so if that helps jog your memory, I was having the same question, but it's a worthwhile pursuit to look at that.
Yeah, it is, and since it was right there at Thanksgiving and it was in Sagittarius, there might have been, travel, or trying to, your opinions, your Sagittarian opinions being impacted by family. A lot of people go through a lot around Thanksgiving with that kind of thing.
But I feel like I would be remiss not to mention just in this 2-week cycle, the May 22nd new moon. And what are we seeing in this country, United States right now? We are seeing riots and people speaking up for their rights. There's a lot of things going on with racism in this country coming to light. And that this incident with George Floyd being killed was only a couple of days after the new moon. And here we are coming in to see what is coming to light based on that action. And I know in my community, I've already seen a lot of different things to sign up for about learning about racial injustice and inequity, and starting to open up the dialogue in community about this, even in little Vermont here. So I think that that's the importance of it, is how can we open up dialogue? How can we bring to light this issue that just desperately needs some attention? And that's really the question.
Yeah. And finding the compassion and understanding in the anger of Mars. You know, there's just something so potent in that combination there. You know, so much has gone on below the surface where we haven't been willing to look at it. We as white people, I guess, it's been hidden from our view. You know, I mean, in so many ways. We live in Vermont. We have had sort of we've had the privilege of not having to deal with it.
Right. But that's a good point, because privilege is hidden in plain sight.
Right.
Right. Exactly. And we don't know. And this is why education is being required, which I like to think of, look at the Gemini sun and the Sagittarius moon. This is all about getting educated, getting the right information, learning the deeper implications of these things.
And getting our goddamn values clear.
Exactly.
Like, come on, folks, straighten out. It's interesting.
That is the message, I think. For sure. I would agree with that. So
so, you know, on a more personal level, and all of these things, you know, we have to kind of look at it in the big picture and then look at it in our own charts. So in your own chart, as you're looking at this and thinking about it, I would just encourage you very clearly to look at that opposition and that square, you know, so look at the house that holds Gemini, the house that holds Sagittarius, and the house that holds Pisces. And think about, you know, where your own blind spots are around some of these issues. Where are your blind spots? We all have them. Right. You know, make no mistake, we all have them.
And this is in the spirit of like inquiry, like be curious about the things you don't know. Like ask yourselves the questions, like be open.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
It's a powerful full moon. Go out and howl at the moon. I guess that's, you know, go out and howl at the moon, or, you know, write some poetry. This would be a beautiful time to sit and write poetry, wouldn't it? With that combination, that'd be really beautiful. Do some meditation, do some writing, do some thinking, get some clarity on your own role in all of this. All right. I'm ready to close down. Anything else you want to say last minute?
No, I think we've covered a lot of bases. So hopefully you got something out of this and learned something new today.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Jennie, for being here, and have a good full moon.
Thanks, Lori.
Bye.